Hello and welcome to the Power and Politics podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Cohen, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Ernst van Zyl, the Head of Public Relations for AfriForum, onto the show. Ernst, thank you for joining me today.
Good morning, Matthew. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I know it's going to be very productive and it's going to touch on some important issues.
Indeed. I look forward to it as well. So in recent days, we've seen a real resurgence in the media, particularly a lot of panic about the US-South African relations. So for those who may not be brought up to speed fully, a few days ago, the US House Committee passed the US-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025. This is an act that was introduced by Representative Ronnie Jackson earlier in the year. Now, seeing as it's been approved by the House Committee, it now stands to be voted on in the House of Representatives in US Congress. And this brings it one step closer to actually being passed into law. Now, Ernst, we've seen a lot of mixed messaging around this bill in South African media especially. Could you perhaps explain what the actual purpose of this bill is?
Right. So I think firstly, I would encourage your listeners, if they're curious, to go read the bill for themselves. It's really not a long document. It's not theory heavy. You're not going to get lost in it. It's very digestible for anyone. You don't need a political science degree to decipher it. You gave the title there. So if you just Google that title, you can find it readily available in many sources. So that's what I firstly want to recommend to your audience. If they are genuinely interested in this topic and want to know more, the best place to get information is straight from the horse's mouth. But I'll sum it up for you. I mean, this is a review of the relationship between South Africa and the United States based on many different issues, both domestically and internationally. So internationally, firstly, what does this bill enable? It enables targeted sanctions against ANC politicians and other politicians. I think the bill doesn't just explicitly focus on the ANC, but it has a particular emphasis on the ANC. So it makes individual sanctions, targeted sanctions possible, which is much better than sanctions that target the entire country. And this is what AfriForum has been advocating from the beginning, is that there should be targeted sanctions, not sanctions that punish the normal South African on the street, but rather those politicians that are pushing destructive policies that amount to human rights abuses, and also those politicians that are engaged in corruption and getting away with it with impunity. And that's what this bill does. But it also has a international relations dimension, where South Africa is increasingly aligning itself more rhetorically than materially with many powers that are opposed to the United States, whether that be Russia, Iran, or China. And this has been happening very explicitly. It's not some conspiracy theory that you have to go look through secret files or leaked documents to see. It's open, out in the open for everyone to see. And that's, of course, concerning the United States, because South Africa has professed this ideology or stance of non-alignment, where it's not going to take a hardline stance either side of, for example, conflicts or the East-West divide or South-West divide. But it is taking very strong sides here, and it's not even, and it's no secret. And the bill goes into extensive examples of how this is happening. But something else that the bill does that's very fascinating, that a lot of people seem to miss, that's why I encourage people to go read it, is it actually goes into detail on a lot of things happening domestically within South Africa as well. So it talks about, for example, it names state capture. You don't have to read between the lines. It speaks explicitly about state capture. That's a major development in regards to American relations with South Africa, and state capture being elevated to such a high level of awareness. It also mentions the decay happening at SOEs, state-owned enterprises like Transnet. It talks about state failure. It talks about the rampant corruption within South Africa. And then it, of course, mentions the absolute just disastrous ambassador to the United States from South Africa, Mr. Zyl, who was chased away, I think almost literally, well, quite literally actually, from the United States after making bizarre and just inappropriate comments about the president of the country where he's being hosted. We can talk about his replacement or de facto replacement, Mr. Jonas, if you want as well. But that's a quick overview. So the bill actually covers quite a lot. It's not just about international issues. It's also not just about particularly the what's happened in recent years. It's quite comprehensive in regards to outlining what points of friction America has identified. And these are genuine points of friction. They give examples. It's not just fluffy speculation.
Right. So thank you for that explanation. And then, of course, as you said, if anybody would like to Google and read the bill for itself, its name is the U.S.-South African Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025. So be sure to check
as I
that
said,
out.
Don't be chased away by the title. It really is a very easily digestible document, and it's not very long. You will be able to very quickly read through it, and I do recommend it, as you said.
Okay, perfect. So as part of your explanation, something that I think is important to highlight, which you said near the beginning, is that this is not targeted at sanctioning South Africa as a whole, but rather the targeting of certain political leaders. Right. And I think this is an incredibly important point because, unfortunately, since this topic has resurfaced, we've seen the narrative return of this demonization of AfriForum, which really makes no sense because, of course, AfriForum is working to uplift South Africans through many activities. And so to say that AfriForum supports damage to South Africans really doesn't make sense. It's a counterintuitive narrative. And so, Ernst, I'd like to ask you, what are some of the benefits that you could see arising from this bill if it's passed into law that perhaps a lot of the media is just not sharing with us?
Well, the first benefit is the fact that the politicians that are going to be targeted by it are those engaged in corruption. So, I mean, in South Africa, and this is a tough question that I've asked, and almost like a rhetorical question in many interviews that I've done, when people parrot that ANC line of this bill is an anti-South Africa bill, it's going to hurt South Africa. I just asked the rhetorical question. Your audience can consider it for themselves. Can you explain to me, in simple terms, how sanctioning the luxurious lives of corrupt politicians are going to hurt the average South African on the street? And I'm not asking this in a snarky way or sarcastic way. I genuinely don't see the connection. I don't see how inconveniencing or hurting the luxuries of a corrupt politician's life and cutting them off from these luxuries that they enjoy, how that's going to hurt the average South African on the street. So maybe in the comment section of this episode, if someone knows, they can explain that. And that's the important thing to note, is that that's the spin. The spin that is happening is that this is an anti-South Africa bill. But from all that I can see is, though, firstly, it very explicitly targets individuals. And then secondly, those individuals that it is targeting are individuals that are engaged in acts that are actually harming South Africans and South Africa as a whole, engaged in corruption, engaged in pushing destructive policies, engaged in either extremist rhetoric or extremist actions on the international stage, and harming South Africa's interests in the process. So, I mean, that's where the real damage is being done. And this bill is actually a check on that damage, is actually consequences for the reckless behavior of the ANC-led government. And I think that's the crux of the whole matter, is that the people that are going to be negatively affected by this bill, if it passes, are the people that are already doing major damage to South Africa. And that's a good thing. Call me controversial.
Right. I see very little controversial in that, to be honest. But while this specific bill, of course, assists from the political front, we do also know that education on the ground is important and making sure that people understand what's going on. And so for that reason, I'd like to bring up your documentary.
Sure.
Is Trump Right About South Africa? So this documentary, brilliantly produced, as I must say, has really seemed to gain a lot of traction. You know, we've seen the likes of Elon Musk acknowledge it on X. And so I'd like to ask you, what sort of reactions have AfriForum received from this documentary?
Right. So we made this documentary earlier this year because when this whole diplomatic crisis started, there was a lot of debate and panel discussions and social media arguments, people writing opinion pieces. But it's the radioactive question that nobody seemed to want to touch is just the simple question, is Trump actually right about South Africa? People were talking about Trump's character. They were talking about how the United States should not bully South Africa, how South Africa is a sovereign country. All of these types of points were being made, but nobody really wanted to touch that question of, well, is he actually right about South Africa? Let's leave the implications of this diplomatic crisis aside for a moment and just investigate the truth claims or the veracity of the claims being made. And therefore, we made that documentary to actually explore that question. And to explore that question, we talked to two experts that I think are at the forefront of many of these issues in regards to their knowledge. So firstly, we talked to Martin van Staden. Now, why did I talk to Martin van Staden? Well, you and many of in your audience might have seen the fact that South Africa has more than 142 race-based laws on the books.
Yes.
Well, how do we know that fact? Well, we know that fact because Martin van Staden of the Free Market Foundation did the research. He went down into the statistics, dug into the data, and actually gave us that number. He went and did the hard, dirty work so that we actually know how many race-based laws there are in South Africa. Because before he did that, everyone was speculating. Everyone was guessing different numbers. Now we have a concrete number and we have a concrete methodology on how it was reached. So I had to talk to Martin because at the center of this whole diplomatic crisis was one of the issues was the fact that South Africa has these racially discriminatory laws that even discriminate against foreign companies like Starlink, keeping Starlink out of South Africa based on race criteria. So I talked to Martin particularly about how many race laws does South Africa have, what's the extent of it, what effect does it have. And then I talked to Dr. Theo de Jager, who is another expert in regards to the farming community in South Africa, the farmers of South Africa also being at the center of this diplomatic crisis due to the issues of farm murders being mentioned by Donald Trump and by Elon Musk and chants like kill the boer, kill the farmer. So Theo is the head of SAI, which is one of the largest farming unions, trade unions in South Africa, or farming unions. And then also he's the former head of the World Farmers Organization. So this is also someone with vast experience and knowledge about farming, not just in South Africa, but in the world. And there's another reason why I wanted to talk to Dr. Theo, and that's the fact that he was one of the victims of one of the worst and most blatant attempts at censorship that I've seen in my entire life from not just the South African government, but any government ever. And that was, so I'll give the short version of it. It's a fascinating long story. He details it in the documentary. But what basically happened was Theo de Jager was in a picture that was published by the South African government where there was a meeting I think at the German embassy, and he was part of the group photo. And then the photo that was published by the Department of Agriculture had Mr. Theo de Jager edited out of the photograph in like Stalin style, unpersoning, this man does not exist. Why? Because he was one of the most staunch critics from the farming community against the Expropriation Act that threatens private property rights in South Africa. So I had to talk to Theo because, I mean, if you wanted to get the critique of the government in its purest form and its most genuine form, then you talk to the targets of the government's censorship. And I mean, being edited out of a government photograph is one of the most like blatant and egregious and gross versions of censorship that you can imagine. So those are the two experts that I talked to. And to conclude in regards to what the reaction was, well, firstly, the documentary got about 100,000 views or 200,000 views at the time on YouTube, which if that was all that had happened, we had just got 200,000 views and that's the end of it, it would have been already considered a major success. But then something else happened, as you mentioned. I shared it on X just to give it a little bit more of exposure, and then I can't tell you how, I have no idea, Elon Musk gets it into his hands and he shares the documentary. And the documentary jumps all the way to 45 million views. That's almost the population of South Africa. And
Amazing.
I'm still flabbergasted about it to this day. That the day that happened, my phone just started exploding with notifications. I had no idea what was going on. And then I put one and two together and I realized, the richest man in the world just shared my documentary that details race laws, farm murders, and kill the boer and other issues in South Africa. And that's the other thing that's why I'm very glad this was the documentary that blew up, is because in this documentary, we actually went out of our way to meticulously ensure that every single claim made in that documentary has a source attached to it. So AfriForum made sure that this documentary, if any claim is made by anyone in that documentary, there's either a footnote that appears on screen that says, here is where the information comes from, or the speaker themselves gives that information through their interview. So I'm very glad that that's the documentary, that a documentary that was that obsessed with bulletproofing and making sure that the information is absolutely watertight and sourced. That was the documentary that went viral. I'm very, very glad about that. That just shows sometimes things just work out.
Of course. And that amount of views is remarkable, to say the least. Almost the population size of South Africa. Out of interest, the reactions that you received, does it seem to be more from influential people such as Elon Musk and policymakers, or more just ordinary citizens on the ground, or both?
Yeah, well, it's been both. I know of a lot of influential people that have watched that documentary because Elon Musk shared it and they reached out to us. But then also just a lot of normal people also reaching out and saying, we didn't know that this was happening in South Africa. And thank you very much for this information. And thank you for the sources. We now went on our own research journey into these facts. And something I always say on my YouTube channel, but also just in general, is whenever me or any of my AfriForum colleagues make a claim, don't just believe what we say, research what we say. If I make a claim that doesn't sound right, something sounds not true there or inaccurate, or AfriForum makes a claim that sounds funny or something doesn't seem right to you, go do your own research, go check it out, double check it. You'll find out that AfriForum makes sure that our information is correct and factual, but I do still encourage people to go double check the facts, even if it's from someone that you trust. That's why I put that footnote there in regards to this bill, is when I make claims about what's in that bill and you're like, that can't be true. Like, okay, go check it for yourself. It is readily available. And that's another thing in the reaction to the documentary that I found fascinating. So News 24 wrote a hit piece on the documentary, a fact check, if you will. That's what they call a hit piece nowadays. But the fact check was behind a paywall. So, and the AfriForum documentary is free to view for everyone. So there's another insight, I think, that's captured within that phenomenon. The fact that the AfriForum documentary is free, but the fact check is hidden behind a paywall. It shows where the priorities of the two entities lie. AfriForum's priority is to get as much good quality information out there to as many people as possible. So we put a lot of resources, time and money into making a documentary that doesn't make us any money, but we put it out there to serve the purpose, not to make money, but to raise awareness, to put the truth out there, while News 24 prioritizes making money over the truth. So it's much more important for them to get those subscriptions in so that people can read their fact check, rather than to get the fact check out there, or to, as they say, fight misinformation. And it's just very inside. It just tells you the whole story on who prioritizes truth and who prioritizes profits. And in the end, I don't know how many people read that hit piece. I don't think a lot of people are paying to go read it behind a paywall. I think
I don't think it's near the amount of numbers of your documentary. I think we can be safe on that fact.
No, but so, yeah, I did. Someone did send me the fact checks within the documentary, just so I know what they were fact checking. And I honestly can't really name one that isn't just a fallacy, that isn't just like, well, this is kind of true, but it doesn't serve the narrative. Therefore, it's misinformation, or this is technically true, but it contradicts this beautiful story from the ANC. So therefore, it's problematic. That every single fact check in that fact check, it pretty much follows that line. It's not that they attack the claims for being false; they attack the claims for contradicting what the ruling or reigning ideology or reigning views are on these issues. So that's the fact check. I just saved you, like, I don't know how much it costs to go view for a News 24 subscription, but if you were really interested in that fact check, that's the gist of it. I just gave you the spoilers.
Well, I certainly wasn't hoping to pay for a subscription anytime soon. I hear they've actually been giving them away with Take-A-Lot, funnily enough. So it shows you where the subscription base is going. But something that I'd like to actually bring up is that although US-South Africa relations have sort of come into the spotlight, right, because of how everything's progressed, I think people need to remember where the issue truly lies, which is ultimately this crisis of farm murders. But then we also have the kill the Boer phenomenon that happens, unfortunately. And so I'd like to ask a little bit about AfriForum's strategy in that regard. So when AfriForum first sent its delegation to the US and sort of opened up this investigation and really this sort of dialogue, why specifically the US and why at that specific time?
So AfriForum has been sending liaison groups to many different countries for many years now. And that's not because we just want to tell the world, we just like telling the world about what's happening in South Africa. No, it's because in South Africa, we first and foremost prioritize solving these problems domestically. We've sent many letters to the president, previous presidents, showing that AfriForum is open to solving these problems domestically. We've done that for many years, saying we don't want people from the outside coming in to try and solve these problems. We want to solve these problems here. But every time it follows the same pattern. AfriForum asks to solve this internally. We send a letter to the president on issues that we care about, and the president sends us a reply of, "We've received your letter, thank you very much," and then we hear nothing back from them. After years of that just constantly happening, we say, okay, well, if you don't want to listen to us, if you're going to take that approach, we are going to talk to people who will listen to us. So then we talk to our friends and allies outside of South Africa, giving them the information on what's going on here and telling them how they can help. And then suddenly the government comes in and say, no, come back, talk to us. We want to solve this here in South Africa. That happened in 2018. When we went to the United States, and it happened again in 2025. And in 2018, after the president stood up in Parliament when AfriForum was in the United States and said, "No, come back, let's solve this," we send a letter to the President Ramaphosa, and say, "All right, thank you. Let's start the conversation. Let's start solving these problems domestically. And then as soon as we're back from the United States and the diplomatic storm calms down, then everything goes back to normal, with the president is giving us the cold shoulder and not responding." So in 2025, when he once again goes up on the podium and says, no, come back. Why are you going overseas? Come talk here. Let's solve it here. It just doesn't hit the same. It doesn't have the same weight, because we know what's going to happen. It's just so that you are doing damage control because a diplomatic crisis is unfolding around you, and you want to give the impression that you really want to solve this domestically. Well, AfriForum has been very open and transparent about the fact that we constantly are trying to engage with people in South Africa, including the government, to solve these problems. But the world doesn't seem to be there. And I mean, that's what people need to understand, is that AfriForum would very much prefer to solve these things here domestically at home. But that really raises the question, what do you do when you are given the cold shoulder about issues that you deeply care about, like threats to private property rights, like chants that encourage the murder of people based on their identity, like the brutal farm murders? When you are constantly given the cold shoulder and ignored by the government and the president, do you then just sit back and resign in defeat and say, well, we tried? There's nothing we can do. No, of course not. If you really genuinely care about these issues, you're going to try and find every single avenue to bring about change. And if the avenues to bring about change within South Africa don't work or are unresponsive or are arrogant, well, then you go talk to people who will listen. And we have talked to many people who genuinely care abroad about these issues. And we've made a lot of very strong and very influential friends along the way. And I think we're better off for it. The fact that there's now this focus on South Africa. And that's why this whole narrative from the ANC trying to blame AfriForum for trying to, quote unquote, damage South Africa, it just falls completely flat. And people can see them for what they are. AfriForum, as you said earlier correctly, wants what's best for South Africa, and we're allowed to care about the issues that we care about. And I don't understand the issues that AfriForum puts at the very center of our campaigns should not be controversial issues. The murdering of farmers should not be an issue that we debate whether it's an issue that is worth our attention or not. Opposition to chants about murdering anyone based on their identity, doesn't matter whether that be a cultural identity, a religious identity, an ethnic identity, a racial identity. Opposition to those chants should not be controversial. And then thirdly, standing up against threats to private property rights, one of the most foundational rights you can have in a democracy, one of the most important constitutional rights that we have as South Africans. When that right is threatened and you sound the warning alarm about it and you stand up in defense of that right, that should not be controversial. That should be one of the easiest issues to stand with AfriForum. But for some reason, those that stand with the government and stand with those that chant about murdering farmers, they see this as some complex issue, as something that's not clearly right and wrong, but rather an issue where AfriForum can very easily be framed as the bad guys. It's really strange, but I mean that's just the experience so far. I mean, nobody said that standing up for what's right is going to be easy. It should be easy, but that's not how reality works.
Right. And I think it's incredibly important that you outlined the background of your efforts, that you did attempt to solve this issue internally, because unfortunately, one of the rhetorics that I see time and again is this accusation that somehow AfriForum is looking to make South Africa look bad on the world stage, that it's trying to ruin our reputation. However, once you've attempted to go through every avenue internally, every branch of government, legally, judicially, what are you supposed to do? And as you said, these are issues that they're not just simple ideological issues. These are serious problems that need to be sorted out. So I'm glad that you gave us that background. I would, however,
what's also I think important to note here is that there's a very strong parallel to some toxic families where if one family member is being abusive, the person who goes to the police to report that family member is often then made the scapegoat, is then often made to feel that you are now making the family look bad. You are putting the family at risk. We should be solving this internally in the family. Well, the family is not solving it internally. It's not being solved, and the abuse is continuing. So at some point, you have to go to someone else. You have to tell a neighbor, or you have to tell the police, or you have to tell a teacher or someone else about the abuse happening within the home, because it's not being solved. You can't just say, well, you're making the household look bad. The abuser is making the household not just look bad, but they are making people's lives worse. They are abusing people. And at some point, someone else has to know about it if it's not going to be solved within the family. I think that's the best metaphor for this situation.
Right. That is definitely a very good metaphor. And I think it certainly resonates. And while, of course, this is an incredibly important issue, I would actually like to take a bit of time to talk about the other activities that AfriForum does.
Sure.
Because, yes, we do know that this is something that's certainly at the forefront politically at the moment. But there is a lot of other work that you have been getting up to assist South Africans on a day-to-day basis. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So maybe first, for those that are unaware, how AfriForum works is on a membership model basis. So we don't get government funding. We don't get funding from billionaires or some oligarchy of people. We are funded by our 315,000 members. So to be an AfriForum member is not as simple as just liking a Facebook page or filling in a form and then you're a member. You actually have to be a donating member. So you have to give a donation every month to be considered a member. And we have about just over 300,000 of those members that give their donation every month so that we can do what we do. So we have a two-pronged approach. We call it a veg en bou approach, the fighting and building approach. So on the fighting side, we are a civil rights organization. So we go to court to fight for South Africans' constitutional and civil rights from a wide range of issues. So that's freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, private property, you name it. All the integral rights, constitutional rights that you have as a South African. And then on the other side, we have the building facet of our organization, and that's through our branches network. So we have over 170 branches all across the country, and every one of those branches organizes the people in that community to identify the issues that they're facing, often issues due to government failure, things that the government should be doing, and then we find solutions, community-based solutions to those problems. It's all volunteer based, so we don't pay people to do this. It's people doing it out of their own time and own pocket, because if they don't, the community is going to get worse and worse because somebody has to do something. The government surely is not. And then we also have our neighborhood watch network. We have over 175 neighborhood watches all across the country that patrol their communities, keep them safe, and once again are on a volunteer basis. And they operate within the confines of the law. Then people shouldn't confuse them with militias or vigilante groups that are taking the law into their own hands. They operate under the South African law, and they cooperate with police very well. Often there's very good relationships between the local AfriForum neighborhood watch and the local police station, because the friction between AfriForum and the government happens at the top level, between top level politicians. That's where you see most of the friction. But at the grassroots level, the local police station doesn't see a problem with AfriForum. They are just happy for the supplement, for the help and the support. They are completely overwhelmed by the crime wave in South Africa. So that's how AfriForum makes a difference. We don't just fight in court. We also build. We also organize communities, and we also have a lot of So AfriForum is a explicitly Christian organization and explicitly Afrikaans organization. But we also have, a lot of the issues that we fight for are issues that particularly, but not exclusively, affect Afrikaners, the Afrikaner cultural community. But we also do a lot of intercultural cooperation through my colleague Barend Eis, who is head of intercultural cooperation and projects. So we have joint agricultural projects, joint cultural development projects. There's a lot of those projects going on behind the scenes as well, but not just behind the scenes. We send out press statements to the media about those projects too. It's just the sinister thing that happens is those projects don't get covered in the media, especially not the intercultural projects, because that kind of breaks the narrative about AfriForum that the media is trying to push. It's too much of a feel-good story. You'd rather be pushing negative things. You'd rather be pushing racism hoaxes rather than stories of intercultural cooperation, especially if AfriForum is involved. So unfortunately, my colleague Barend Eis does incredibly interesting work and important work at AfriForum's intercultural cooperation department, but at the same time he does very thankless work, because a lot of the time the media just doesn't cover his stories. But if any of your listeners are curious about these projects or any other projects of AfriForum, what we're doing, you can just go to our website. Our website fully translates into English as well. If you click on the English at the top right of the screen, it'll translate to English, and then you go to news and press statements, and you'll see everything that we're releasing, press statements on a daily basis on what we're doing all across the country. So that's a way to, if you are curious, to go check what we're doing.
Okay, great. That certainly was a very broad breakdown of what AfriForum does. And so, yes, if anybody is curious, please go check out the website as Ernst suggested. Ernst, if anybody would like to become a member, how do they go about doing so?
Well, that's very easy. I'll give you a link that has the easiest way, but so you can go to that link in the description of this episode. But you can also go to our website and just click join, and it will take you also to a page where you can join. And unlike the race-obsessed governments of South Africa, we don't ask your race or identity when you're trying to become a member. So it's not as some EFF revolutionaries lie and say, oh, you can only become a member if you're Afrikaans or an Afrikaner. No, anyone can become a member if they like what we're doing and want to support what AfriForum does. So yeah, that's the best way. I think the easiest and fastest way would be to follow a link that I'll give to Matthew. But then also you can just sign up on our website as well. That'll also work.
Okay, great. So yes, if anybody is interested, please be sure to check out the link, which will be in the description box below. Ernst, do you have any other final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we end?
Well, I think the most important thing that I want to end on is particularly the idea that when it comes to bringing about change, you should be diversifying your change portfolio. You should not just be voting. Voting is important, and you should be taking part in democracy and democratic elections. But that can't be all. That's the bare minimum that you should be doing. You should also be identifying community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations in your community, doing good work, that are helping people, that are making a difference and getting involved in some way, whether that be becoming a volunteer or just giving a donation every month. That really makes a big difference, and that's going to make you a lot less hopeless when it comes, feelings of hopelessness when it comes to the party politics side of South Africa. A lot of people look at party politics and say, "Oh, we can't really see where positive change is going to come from." Well, when you become increasingly my English is now has left me now. No, when you become increasingly involved in community-based organizations outside of party politics, you really start feeling a lot more positive about the change that you are able to bring about as a community or as an individual, because you see that change in a tangible way every time you volunteer or every time that organization that you support financially does something good. So that would be my big advice to people, is if you're feeling a bit hopeless in regards to party politics, broaden your change horizons. Don't just wait for the next election. Identify organizations near you doing good work. It doesn't have to be AfriForum. Any organization doing something good in your community or near you or in your country, support them in any way that you can. It's going to not just help your country and your community, it's also going to make you a little less hopeless, feeling a little less hopeless.
Right. That's an incredibly important message, one that certainly shouldn't be taken for granted. And yes, if anybody is interested in taking action, don't just sigh and wait for the next election. Take action, get involved in civil society organizations such as AfriForum. Indeed. Ernst, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show. I certainly appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much for the conversation, Matthew, and all the best for your podcast and this platform.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So to anybody who enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe to the channel. And if you would like to get involved in AfriForum or simply learn more about the organization, please follow the link in the description box below. Until next time, I'm Matthew Cohen, and this is Power and Politics.